Guild Wars 2, a free-to-play mmorpg set in the fantasy world of Tyria, released to universal acclaim back in 2012, and since has marched on with success, with 3 major expansions for the game, the most recent being this very year with End of Dragons. With the game's 10-year anniversary just around the corner, today we take a deep dive to see what the game has to offer nearly a decade after release, exploring its world and getting to know some of its inhabitants on this epic journey, with some already so excited they forgot for a moment that they even have legs. My name's Mitch Mannix, and this is my journey looking into Guild Wars 2 and why it quite frankly is ridiculous. As always, our journey begins at the character creator, where Guild Wars 2 sports a fairly middling amount of customization options when compared to its competitors. One thing that is clear right off the bat is how interesting its playable races are. The powerful looking Char bringing up PTSD from a certain ocean-based survival game, the Sylvari for anyone looking to cosplay as anime Bellsprout, and of course the far less exotic human that is so inclined you can customize to take on the world's evil as a giant armored baby. But none of these races will cut it. As for this grand adventure, we will need a true legend. And with that I proudly introduce the hero of this story, Disco Gizmo, the most revered of the Azura race, a necromancer armed with the deadly combination of disco and pure evil. With our selections confirmed, Guild Wars 2 sets up the starter zone and our journey with a cutscene showcasing not only its unique art style, but also early glimpses into the character within its narrative.
Whatever the imbeciles outside the city have broken, I'll fix, and make my name doing so.
Taking our first steps into the world, we are thrust into the character story, and tasked with controlling some defective technology that the Azura race pride themselves on crafting, immediately enhanced by the game's spoken dialogue, even for our pal Gizmo.
Zoja's rarely wrong. Don't tell her I said rarely, by the way.
Okay, his voice sounds very well put together. I was expecting something more like... Yep, that's it. It transpires that the detestable group The Inquest is to blame for the chaos after tampering with the golems, and Disco Gizmo wastes no time in tracking down the Inquest prototype at the heart of the problem to take it down, using the game's highly mobile flavour of tab-targeting combat, with dodge rolling to avoid attacks and certain skill buffs for flanking an enemy. On the subject of our pint-sized Necro, what stood out for me immediately during this was how fluid and well-crafted the animations for playable characters are. The running, dodging and jumping movement doing well at bolstering the game's visual experience so far after release. And they are all dead. With the initial story missions concluded, we set about exploring the starter zone and getting involved in its opportunities for gear and XP. An experience for me at least that was incredibly enjoyable. Guild Wars 2, rather than drip-feeding the same drawn-out fetch quests as a single mode of early leveling, presents the player with a number of options, even in its first hour. I began helping one of the scientists with their experiments in a more traditional early quest format, then spotted a marker atop a nearby building and worked my way through a jumping puzzle up to it for more experience and a great look at the land, followed by an NPC actually coming up and getting my attention.
Maybe you.
Recruiting and escorting me to a now newly available public event within the starting zone for even more rewards, all leading to a very immersive MMO experience early on, exploring the land for points of interest and visitors while meeting and working alongside the game's inhabitants, with some clearly not being able to contain their laughter at the sight of Gizmo's ears migrating into his amazing hairdo whenever he gets excited. Journeying further into the game's tarnished coast continent, we stumble upon more of the Azura's captivating settlements and stop off to grab some supplies. While working up the side of a building to grab yet another vista, a whole crowd of players can be seen stampeding past, and without a second thought the decision is made to join in whatever shenanigans is occurring, taking Gizmo on a seamlessly transitioning chain of world events, requiring our newly joined band of adventurers to complete a number of objectives before marching and gliding down to the next. All culminating in a boss fight, with Gizmo unfortunately too busy staring at his map to find out where he had ended up to participate in.
Frog legs, anyone? No? Alright, then it's best we depart.
It may not seem like a lot, but having little quips from the NPCs like that, whilst working through the world's events, really places them within the game's world, and makes the experience feel less like simply jumping on a train for some quick XP, and more like actual events, playing out across the game's landscapes. Oh, and of course, Giz had to go back and get that vista for a good look at the zone, with a number of levels obtained and for some reason pretending like he had just won an Academy Award.
I'd like to thank my crew and my college instructors.
We return to our compatriots to continue the story, getting a chance to meet more of the game's characters, and to get another flashback to a former terrifying adversary.
Whoa! Jesus, calm down!
Soon after following the story, Gizmo was released into the wider world, getting a look at some of the truly awe-inspiring design of Guild Wars 2's largest cities and player hubs. Visiting Ratu Sum for a chance to kick off the professions and explore the city's great use of verticality. As well as a little later the grand city of Lion's Arch, a truly amazing location, brimming with character and the ingenious idea to provide roller skates to the city's guard for quick deployment to duties. The game's story missions play out in chapters every 10 levels, with the idea being exploring the land and exploiting the various opportunities for experience in between. After taking in the sights of Lion's Arch, I thought about putting the game to the test when it comes to having freedom when leveling, so decided instead of going just north of my previous leveling zone to instead make the journey all the way over to Snowdon's Drifts, one of the other level 15 to 25 zones, across the land but located much further away from my Azura beginnings. Not just that, but I decided to go on foot instead of locating what I imagine would be a quick portal to a location nearby, partially due to wanting to have an MMO exploration feeling, and partially because I am an idiot. With the latter being confirmed almost immediately, as while wandering through one of the higher level zones in between me and my destination, I somehow managed to get set up in a deadly ambush by a small child.
Damn you, Cricket!
But the world would have to throw more than that at Disco Gizmo before he gives up. And with a bit of luck, a very kind roaming player, and with some deduction, I made it to the snow-tipped slopes of the Snowdon Drifts, venturing out, leveling up, and trying not to get mowed down by some particularly speedy player mounts. Now fully released out into the open world, a whole host of activities available to keep things varied and interesting as I explored and leveled, I couldn't help but feel almost unable to process why it had taken me so long to really experience Guild Wars 2. When it comes to leveling specifically, I personally find that within a great experience something is almost always sacrificed. What is incredibly impressive is that Guild Wars 2 manages to keep things so interesting, injecting zones with group events seamlessly flowing into each other with completionist and exploration-based activities, while at the same time keeping an entertaining and personal feeling narrative interweaving it all together.
Who is it? Oh, okay. Yep. Oh my god! Throw a fucking disco ball at it!
And you too can help cleanse the land of impromptu oversized arachnids by dropping a like on the video if you enjoy it and letting me know your thoughts down in the comments. Make sure to subscribe for the channel for a whole host more RPG greatness. It's free and really helps out small YouTubers like me. Since we had breezed past level 10, we unlocked the ability to swap between two sets of weapons during combat. For those that are not aware, Guild Wars 2 grants the player a set of abilities based on the current weapon equipped. For example, Gizmo's knife, when held in the main hand, grants access to health recovery and necromancer abilities, in contrast to his staff abilities that have more of a focus on area of effect attacks. Not every class can use every weapon, but that doesn't stop the game in providing a huge range in terms of builds and playstyles, especially when coupled with the class abilities. Bar swapping will be familiar to anyone who has played the Elder Scrolls Online.
Guild Wars did it first.
Indeed, and adds yet another layer to its deep and satisfying combat mechanics. With the plan in place to make a voyage to a wayward zone once we'd outleveled the current, we set about working our way through the levels, with the mind to explore as much of the land as possible in the process, making sure to make a trip back each 10 levels to continue the personal storyline, leading to my first experience with the game's first-person camera feature.
Oh, cool, you can go first person. Yes, look, I go back. We will never speak of this again.
Upon reaching level 40, the game's first dungeons were unlocked, and Gizmo, leaving no stone unturned, rounded up a group using the game's party finder tools. Dungeons are available in two difficulty modes, Story and Explorable, with the latter available after completing the Story mode option, and cleverly covers the aftermath of the Story mode, featuring branching paths to take, increased difficulty, and currency to purchase unique armor and weapons modelled according to the theme of the dungeon. The dungeons were great for the most part, with some amazing looking locations, good lengths, and rewards both in XP and gear to justify seeking them out. The only real downside comes when attempting a first playthrough with the mind to play out all the cutscenes covering the story of the instance. In my experience, there wasn't exactly a huge number of groups being formed for the dungeon runs, so encountered a bit of a mixed bag if players would hang around for first timers to enjoy the story, or steamroll ahead clearing most of it by themselves, even when forming a group with a story focus stated. I can't help but wish that the game featured more than the 9 included, but as a whole, the dungeons were yet another example of Guild Wars 2 including another staple of a great MMORPG and doing it well. With yet another activity to keep us busy, it was on through the levels, venturing across the land every level range, picking up hero points to spend on abilities and stat points, which are given out after completing their respective short open world challenges, while taking time to dive back into the story, which continued to expand in scale, as well as its cast of interesting characters.
Oh, and oh my god, that is disturbing.
My journey taking me across snowy fields to enchanted forests, dank swamps to mechanical cities, whilst constantly jumping in and out of clearing content solo and with others. I can't express how much of a breath of fresh air it was, leveling in this game. With so much variety in its gameplay, some truly outstanding environmental design complemented beautifully by the game's soundtrack and ambient sounds that allow the player to really sink into its experience and to get that feeling of escapism within the game's world that I personally find more and more in short supply.
You, sir, are just too fabulous to die.
After finally reaching the base game cap of 80, it was time to grab some epic gear upgrades, expand into my class specialization, Reaper, as well of course kit Gizmo out with a heart-stopping new drip, ready to dive into some of the game's more late-game orientated offerings. Raiding was first up, after making a trip to the Aerodrome, a location within Lion's Arch specifically used for players looking for groups. Raiding being split into two channels, one for training and one for experienced players, I got a chance to see what it has to offer, and to my delight found that the game really doesn't pull any punches with its raiding content, keeping things challenging to maximize that sense of achievement from the late game outings. Next up was a game mode that some state as being Guild Wars 2's finest accomplishment, that being its truly massive world versus world PvP game mode, blending both player versus player and player versus environment elements, besieging keeps and towers with siege equipment, battling over resource camps, and completing PvE type content to level up in the world rank, separate from the character rank, for a range of rewards. As far as endgame activities go, I can see this mode adding endless amounts of hours to those that get a kick out of this type of large-scale warfare, especially with such huge and diverse maps on offer. One thing I will recommend though for anyone looking to jump in would be to get a mount first, as for more times than not, poor Gizmo here was left in the dust as his allies marched into battle. Now I know what you may be thinking, but why in 2022 is Guild Wars 2 ridiculous? I'll tell you why. At nearly every turn during my time with the game, Guild Wars 2 handed me an experience that felt worthwhile, incredibly entertaining, and rich with features and atmosphere. Now I'm always mindful to look out for elements where a game doesn't quite deliver to give the best report possible, and Guild Wars 2's ability to consistently provide such great experiences across the board is quite frankly ridiculous. And that's without mentioning the fact that the game doesn't have any enforced subscription model, and as far as I could see, isn't littered with pay-to-win microtransactions. If you want a place to lose yourself in an RPG open world, this game has it in spades. If you want one of the best playgrounds to roam around with friends for PvP or PvE, then this game nails that. If you are a completionist with a thirst to check every cliff edge and find every hidden away location, this game will not only give you that in insane amounts, but also reward you massively for doing it. Which is an important point, that so many options for leveling especially give out worthwhile amounts of experience, not leading to players feeling forced to pick one or the other, so to truly set out to do what they want to do. The sheer amount of elements that Guild Wars 2 does well is staggering. Bringing me back again, seeing that this game doesn't get more attention for this is ridiculous to me. The game even features both explorable underwater zones, as well as having its own combat system built around it, because of course it does, to again give the game a feeling that it's overflowing with areas to explore and activities to get involved in. The game of course has its shortcomings, such as its dated visuals that I'm sure will turn away those that have justifiably become more accustomed to the more visually appealing contemporary offerings, a lack of player housing, and its crafting that, although ticking all the boxes by most standards, does lack the more advanced dynamics that games such as Final Fantasy XIV have brought to the table with its profession system. Simply said, that if you are an MMO fan and you are yet to try Guild Wars 2, then I highly recommend you give the game a try. As for me, it without a doubt sits as one of the best experiences the genre has to offer. So much so that if enough of you beautiful people like the video, then we may have to continue Disco Gizmo's journey into a certain newly discovered dragon-toting expansion. But as for right now, I can't help but feel that I may stick around a while in the world of Tyria, as even 10 years later, it is one hell of a place to be. Thank you so much for watching. Have you played Guild Wars 2? As usual, I'm keen to get your thoughts down in the comments. I want to give a shout out to the channel members for kindly supporting the channel and helping me keep as much high quality content coming as possible. If you're interested in supporting the channel by becoming a member to unlock all sorts of perks and exclusive videos, the information will be down in the description. Thanks again for anyone making it this far into the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.